Keith Bennett, resident director of The Lion King on tour. Welcome to Cultural Attaché.
Thank you so much.
So I want to take you back in time a little bit before we start talking about The Lion King. And I'm specifically thinking of a date, October 16th, 1990. And on that date was the very first preview of OK at the Richard Rodgers Theater. When you were in a company that included Brian Stokes Mitchell, who did not go by Stokes at the time, in only his second show. At that point in your career, did you ever foresee into the future that your life and your career would be so entwined with one particular show? Whether it was, you couldn't imagine The Lion King at the time, but did you think
Right.
that one show would become so pivotal to a substantial part of your career?
No, because you know why in theater it's everything's so spontaneous. You never know where you're gonna go. They used to call us. I don't know if you can use that word, those terms. They used to call us gypsies, and you go from one show to the next show to the next show. So wow, okay. I'll tell you what a great experience with that show. So when I did that, it was like I was hoping that the show would run forever. I know Frank Rich during that period, he had a thing we call a war of words with he and Dave Merrick. I don't know if you read about that. Dave Merrick took out this big ad. Because he was behind the show, I thought it would run forever. When you're young, you think that way. So I wasn't looking ahead at what's going to be in the future. I was just right now. I was just in the moment, and I was just present with that show. So and then later on, it's always you always find out from the techies. And the techies, when the techies told me, I don't know if this is gonna run, if it's gonna last. Because you begin to see, I used to always look up in the balcony. I started seeing empty seats, especially after we opened. And it got mixed reviews. So at that point, I started, that's when you start thinking about your next thing. So I did have something on the rise with that because I had just gotten a great agent from that show. I know I'm going off on a tangent on OK, but they I don't know if they still do this, but back in those days, they used to have this event called Waiting in the Wings, and they would get an understudy from each Broadway show, and they would have a big night where you would perform. And that night I did which one of the numbers in the show because I understudied the great Stanley Wayne Mathers, who I also took over the role for Bunzai on Broadway in the show. But he played Duke in OK, and I understudied him. So it was this number called Fidgety Feet. So I went on that night and I did that number and I got an agent. And so at that point, that's when he started moving me into, different directions, the agent. So when the show was about to close, I had already gotten another job. So, man, Brian Stokes Mitchell. Yeah. He was just, like you say, he was just Brian Mitchell at that time.
Right.
And we had Angela Teague, Helmar, Augustus Cooper, Mark Schmaltz. We had, oh my goodness, remember Greg Byrd? Oh my goodness. Who didn't want to dance like Greg Byrd back in those
Exactly.
days? Yeah, he was one of my idols. Greg Byrd, Kevin Ramsey. It was just a burst of talent, but you had to deal with Frank Rich. People used to tease him and call him the Demon Barber, the Barber of Fleet Street. He could close some shows.
He could. The Times still can.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, I know.
crazy.
Yeah. But man, that let me tell you about that show. It's when I first auditioned for that show, I had just gotten back from Europe with Sophisticated Ladies. My mother had passed away, so I had to leave Sophisticated Ladies. And I got back and I was like, man, I need to keep working. And back then you would go into backstage. That's where you found out about auditions and stuff. I don't even know if they have that around anymore, but you don't need it anymore. Or you would go up and look on the board and they would have auditions. You went up to, I think it was the second floor at Equity. Anyway, They were having an audition for a show called Okay. It was at Goodspeed Opera House, which is probably one of the best places I've ever worked. You had Michael Price up there, Sue Frost, and this guy Dan Soretta, who became one of my mentors. Anyway, I went to the audition, and back in those days, dude, I was like a spark plug. I used to get good reviews because I was just relentless with my dancing. And my thing at an audition, now when I see kids at auditions, they're on their cell phones and everything. Not me. I would go into a studio and, get what I needed to get out of this. But anyway, I remember at that audition, Dan Soretta came over to me. He said, I have this devilish face. And he came over to me. He said, "Listen, kid, I think you're a great dancer. I just need to know that you're not gonna cause me any problems when I hire you, because I look so young." I was like, "No, sir, no, no, it's okay." And so what happened? I was the one of the few people that from the Goodspeed Opera House production went to Broadway with the show, and it was great for me because I got to assist Dan Soretta. He and Ken Lee Rogers. During the auditions. So I thought I was like, wow, I'm assisting, for Broadway audition. I'm doing these like great leaps. But that was probably one of the best experiences that I had. And, I got to see, these great people. I remember Henton Battle came in to audition. I remember Greg Byrd came in to audition. I remember when I sat behind the desk with him, and I sat next to David Merrick, and he developed like a likeness to me, and I just remember sitting by him, and he at that point he had a stroke, um, but you're talking about being honest and just watching his reaction to people over there. I mean, it was like you talk about what an experience back in those days, sitting next to the David Merrick. But it was all those guys there. It was
Right.
David Merrick there, Michael Price, Dan Storetta. I think Martin Connor was the director up at Goodspeed Opera House. But anyway, I mean, those is some crazy stories,
No doubt. No doubt. Well, now you've got crazy stories that involve people like Julie Taymor and Garth Fagan. And as somebody who has been on stage in Lion King as Bonsai amongst others, how exacting is Julie Taymor's direction? How much does that require of the cast members? And how particular is Garth Fagan's choreography so that every performance hums the way you probably remember it the first time you saw it?
Well, the thing about them, it's changed too. I call it updating the product. The more and more like I'm into this, a lot of things, like they say, a lot of things stay the same. A lot of her new direction, because like I said, it has evolved, it keeps evolving, it keeps changing. A lot of it has gone back to simplicity of telling a story. And the same thing, with the dance. Look, the truth is, when you look at Garth Fagan's choreography, it's not much you can change or alter. And I think that's when you borderline on brilliance, and you look at the work itself, like the Lioness Chant, or when I watch, just some of the his work and the simplicity of it. A lot of that hasn't changed. They mess around with the kick butt dance somewhat, um, but it's in its original presentation. The same thing with the direction. And it's not because I'm in the show, but I remember when I saw the show, I'm like, holy, look at this. A lot of it doesn't need changing. I think she comes in now and she updates certain things, like kind of fine tuning, um, make moments more clear. That's the thing that I'm noticing. Um,
But I mean, do you really have to make moments so clear when a show's been running for 25 years? I mean, isn't there a certain clarity that the audience is already getting?
yeah, that's true, but also you wanted to keep, like they always use the word, and it's true. You want to keep it fresh. And so also when a different performer comes in, they have a different take on the role. So that's what I mean. Just like fine tuning, like certain situations that may be with Scar or Mufasa, or like we just had a lighting situation here in Portland. So it's maybe move something in a different area of the stage, ever so slightly. But you know, I remember when we were opening up the Vegas cast, which I had left the show. I had been gone away from the show for 9 years. God, that story I'll get into later. But when Julie Taymor came out there, and we sat there, talking with her, it was basically changing just like simple things. Of course, the worldwide show director at the time, John Stefanick, he came in, and it was like an old soul staring. It reminded me of the 80s and the 90s, how we collectively came together and worked. So, but her work, it didn't need much changing to it. You know what I
Right.
mean? Just make, like a car, it's, you're gonna fine tune, different equipment you'll put in, but the work itself, it's changed somewhat, and of course, the truth is we changed some of the dialogue around ever so slightly, and the show has been cut down. We took out you know um cut down the show for Vegas, and they saw that was a means of like, okay, we can try this with the national tour and stuff like that. um so
Right. Well, let me let me
that's
let me ask you about one moment in the show. I've seen the show, I think, 2 or 3 times over the course of 25 years. And
yeah.
there's one moment that always stands out to me, and you might know well about this as one of the hyenas, because I call it the West Hollywood hyena number. Because there's this moment that just feels like suddenly we're in a gay disco. Um, and I don't know if it felt that way performing it.
Yeah. You talking about the kick butt dance?
Yeah, I guess you would know the specifics of what it's called more than I
Yeah.
would. But yeah, I was just sort of going, you know what? I'm in a club in West Hollywood or in Chelsea or wherever.
hmm uh you have to be talking about the kick butt dance, and with the music, dooms, 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 that throbbing, bass line comes in. But I'll tell you, it's like, then if it made you feel that way, you got some butch dudes out there dancing, ready to carve up something on stage.
Mm.
I remember when I first saw the number on Broadway, I just remember watching this kid, Ashi, Smythe, and Pip. And these, they tumbling and everything. So it is. You got this disco beat in the background, but these guys are sitting up there tearing up some shit on stage. They finish the number, and they just, the way they look into the audience. Uh, so probably that male bravado and that toughness and that streetness against that disco beat. So, and that's the number where you get all these screams. And look, and you got a whole bunch of built dudes on stage. They got muscles. I mean, we were like restaging, for the Vegas cast. I looked at those dudes, those muscles. I was like, God, I got hit the gym. You know, but that's a lot of people's favorite number.
Hmm.
You know, all them hyenas jumping around. You funny.
Well, what is the physical wear and tear that the body has to endure doing 8 shows a week of The Lion King? I mean, I remember in the first year or two of the show on Broadway, there were tons of stories about injuries, and I'm assuming that technology has shifted and changed so that the costuming, or the puppetry isn't as heavy as it might have been when it first started. But what does a performer go through? Physically
Yeah,
during 8 shows a week of The Lion King.
it's tough. It's tough. My friend, I come from an era back in the days where you just went to work every day. You would wrap up your leg or your knee, and you go out there, and you just pull through. But I have to be honest, The Lion King is tough. Number one, you're dancing with ornaments and equipment on your head, or there, and I realized there's probably not one character in the show that gets a break. Everyone wears something that can be constricting in terms of movement. And you find yourself, you have to constantly, you're in constant like mode of like exercise and taking ballet classes, because it's tough. The Birdman, he has this, incredible costume, but it also is not just a costume. It has, I call it, equipment that we wear. And all of them, and you're right, 8 shows a week. And so the guy who has to flip in the kick butt dance, he has to do that 8 shows a week, or when I was a hyena, um, you know, but that's just me. I'm like a pit bull, I just, just go for it. But even still now, I'm 60 years old now. I stay in the gym, I work out because of that show. And it is hard on all those dancers. um and on Broadway they have a rake stage. So look, my heart goes out to all those dancers, because of how at a point, physically it can be on the body. It can, probably some of them is often brutal, because even my being a hyena, when came back to the show after a 9-year hiatus, the worldwide show director, he came over to me. He said, "Can you do splits?" He said, "Can you do a half split, in the child down number?" And me, I'm from that, the era. I'm like, no, I don't do half splits. I do full splits. And I had to do that 8 shows a week with that costume and holding the legs. And so, yeah, you have to stay in the gym. You have to train. You have to get your rest. But the honest truth is, my friends, sometimes that's not enough. And so, we've had a lot of injuries. That's why, we have a lot of people coming in and out, and people who have to take time off to let the body heal.
Well, I
So yeah,
assume you have to have a team of chiropractors and massage therapists available too, physical
yeah,
therapists to work with the company.
and we have one that travels with us. Um, I call her the medicine woman, medicine lady. Her name is Haley. Just so when you see this, I got your name. I know your name. She and she works hard, because she got to like get in there, massage, put on the sports kinesio tape. And it's physically, it's a hard show. But that's what the public likes. They like seeing the costumes, and how big the costumes are. But it wears on the body. I do, man. I feel for everyone. Sometimes I feel like guilty that I'm watching them do these 8 shows, and now I'm sitting back as a show director. Sometimes oh my God, I should be out there with them. So let me put myself through it and go to the gym at my age.
Yeah, or get back on stage and do those splits. Um,
Yeah.
Now, as resident director, you have to make sure the show is consistently good night after night after night. How difficult is it to maintain that level of consistency night after night, week after week, town after town?
Well, I will say this much. Number one, I have to be honest. I'm blessed to have these trained actors. That they know where they know where to go on stage at what point, in the script. You know, I I've been, to be honest with these guys. I've been blessed. That I do work with this cast. I'm not just saying that, because this is an interview, but I always think about, they know where to go, they know what to do at what point, at what time, and they basically stick to the script. The lines, stuff. They don't alter the dialogue. So in that, it's been easy to for me. It's been easy to maintain, and it hasn't been too many issues. Uh, of course, when the big, I call them the big wigs, when they come out here, they update, and change some things around based on Julie's vision, and are changing things. But other than that, I've been you know uh blessed to have like these guys. They stick to the script. Sometimes they'll come up and say, listen, can you look at this moment on stage? And, I'll say, all right, let me watch it. Let's sit down and talk about it. And I'm not, I'm not the type of director, paint by numbers. Even when I work with them, you have to always, I believe, if you want to get the best out of your actor, it has to be a collaboration in the coming together, a meeting of the minds when you sit down and you're working on a certain scene. And you tell them, all right, let's sculpt this, let's take this thing and sculpt it and see what happens. All right, this is what they want. This is what they want. They wanted, this certain section. Now there's a new section where um uh the two actors are on stage, Simba and Nala, and they say, look, we don't want you to cross, center stage. And I was talking to one actor. I said, look, just bear with me, do what they told you to do, and let's see how it works out. He was like, well, he was used to being more agile and now you're moving around on stage. I said, well, look, now they want you to stay, stage left, and she's going to stay stage right. And that's after Can You Feel the Love? And they have this fight. So I said, look, just trust me. Just trust me. That's the new direction, and let's see how it works. So when you feel that need that you want to move, use that emotion, to keep yourself stabilized on stage. And it absolutely worked out. So there's sometimes some things just, they work out. And there are other times, Anthony Lynn, who's, he's the worldwide director, he'll say, look, let's try it out. If it works, let's use it. If it don't, let's throw it away and find something new. So I think, to answer your question, it's been easy for me because, sometimes I'll leave it up to an actor and let's see how this thing works. So I have to be honest, I've been fortunate.
Right. Now, I read an interview that Julie Taymor gave the New York Times in 1997 around the time of the show's opening on Broadway. And she was talking about the puppetry in particular, but she said, I want to see the rough edges. I don't want it to be slick. Doesn't a long-running show and a show that's toured the world as many times as The Lion King has have to be slick to be as successful as it is?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It evolves and it changes. Now when you say slick, you mean it's just like strict and rigid and it stays.
It opens as a spectacle, it ends as a spectacle. It has always been about,
Right.
about how this story is presented, that is unique for stage, that is different than the animated film or the quote unquote live action version, which was really just computer animation. But there's a certain pageantry to this, and there is a slickness that goes along with that, particularly something that, whatever degree of changes and alterations may have been made over 25 plus years, but there is a certain slickness. That's what Broadway is on a certain level at this point. There's a slickness. Yeah. There's a slickness to it all. It's a machine. So doesn't.
But you know what? So I think you have to. I get what you're saying. So I believe, for me, I think you have to work against that. Because when you, especially that word machine, it can stifle, the creativity. And so I think you have to, one has to work against that. And I think that's why she comes back and, they say keep it fresh and maybe change some things around. Here's the truth, though. Like most of the people have, these actors, they have their own interpretation, which takes away from, it being just a mechanical and machine performance. They have their own way they interpret. Like, this kid in the show, his name is Nick LaMedica. He plays Zazu, and his puppetry, or Nick Corleone, he plays Timon. And these guys are like skilled puppeteers. You know what I mean? And it's so defined, but you have the human element behind it, which like it takes away from that thing of being just slick and okay. Look, they use this thing just to get that point, the point across to the audience, and it becomes mechanical. They try to bring the human to it. Is that kind of answering your question?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I saw Angela Lansbury's last performance in Sweeney Todd. She did a small tour. She finished it in Los Angeles. And I don't know how well you know the show, but at the end of the first act, they sing a little priest, which is the song about what they're going to do with the first body that Sweeney Todd has killed. And there's a moment in the song where she hits a big mound of dough that's in a bowl. And because it was the last show of the tour, somebody on the stage crew put a whole bunch of flour in it. So when she hit it, flour went flying all over her, all over George Hearn, who was singing the part opposite her. They broke for probably a minute and a half, and the orchestra had to vamp for a minute and a half. The Lion King doesn't strike me as a show where something like that could happen because it's such a tight machine and every
Yeah,
cue is in place. So that's what I mean by slickness
yeah.
is, it's like
But
I'm wondering if there's any room. There's no wiggle room in a show like Lion King, is there?
well, yeah, there is.
Hmm.
I get what you're saying, but that's what I'm talking about. When each artist brings the human to, the puppet. There are times when you're on stage. We just had another Zazu who just left the show, and his puppetry was different than Nick LaMedica's Zazu. You know what I mean? So it does have room for that thing to move around where it's not just like so slick and so rigid. And the same thing with the hyenas. Oh my God, some of the things I used to do as a hyena. One time there was a time I hit Ed, and he's on the floor, because he just hit me and I hit him back, and I went and stood over top of him. I lifted up my leg and took a tinkle on him. You know what I mean? So we do bring that thing to it, but I get what you're saying, because it is, in terms of the dialogue, everything is strict. You look here, we have a Y, we have a 4. You look around at this point, but for us, it's bringing your own humanity to the role, your own human that makes it real. But we have to, because we have a lot of elements that depends on how much you have that wiggle room. Like for Scar, he has to, he flies, he falls at the end of the show. So some of those things, in terms of safety, you have to keep it like strict and rigid, but at the same time, that's why I think it's important, and the acting is so important in this show, because you want that human in those, the confinements and how strict it can be, because of the costumes and the puppetry and the music. Sometimes, me as a show director, I'm still learning that, okay, on this, we need this to happen here because of the music. So this is the type of show where everything, depends on something else. But the artist still has to bring their own, human to these roles. Am I
Right.
making myself clear?
Yeah,
Kind of.
no, I get it. I think we're both saying the same thing, but you're coming at it from the actor's point of view, and I'm coming at it from an observer's point of view.
Yeah.
That there isn't a lot of there is minimal wiggle room in a show like this, but the individual performances are what perhaps compensate for the machinery that is a show like The Lion King.
Yeah. And it just becoming mundane to the actor and to the audience.
Right.
That's why, I always believe the casting is so important too.
Of course.
But there's there are counts, and beats in this show that the actor has to adhere to for the sake of telling a story. But I think that makes it even more difficult, because what they say, you have to go out there every night and commit to that same situation. So
Yeah, I know it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Well, let me ask you something else, because I think long-running successes of a show like The Lion King or Phantom of the Opera or Chicago, which Chicago thinks it's going to become the longest running show. And if the Weislers have anything to say about it, I'm sure it will. Um, but is that kind of success good for Broadway? Doesn't that at a certain level rule out any number of shows that it could equally be as worthy as those or any other show that's on Broadway from getting a chance to be seen?
well, put it this way. I'll look at it this way: for the actor, it has its financial benefits,
Of course. And for the creators.
and for the creators. But we know the creators are going to be fine. But you know, the thing I like about long running show like this, you have dancers who now can basically establish a financial foundation. You can, because listen, let's not pay, not lie to ourselves. We're in this business. We love doing good work, but we do want to eat at the same time. Um, you know, things have changed. I remember now, all the big long running shows, when they started, appearing on Broadway, because they have a whole big, remember Cameron McIntosh, and they had a whole great, like, all these, producers behind them. Um, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I was in a show called High Rollers. We were at the Helen Hayes Theater, and man, we closed in 3 weeks. And that's we have to be honest. That's the nature of the business. You know, um, I guess that's why when I got in the Lion King, I was like, well, I'm going to milk this cow for as long as because I felt as though in the 80s and the 90s I paid my dues. I mean, that's the only thing I can say. I do love new works coming to Broadway. You know, but also it's like, for a lot of people, it's not economically feasible. The tickets are so expensive now.
I
You
know.
know, to, to see these, to see these great works and stuff like that. But I think now we're going to go back, to like, the 2 year runs or 1 year run. Listen, my friend, there have been some incredible shows that only lasted for a year.
Or lasted much less than that. I mean, the biggest show, in the hottest ticket in New York right now, is the first ever revival of Stephen Sondheim's Merrily We Roll Along, and the original production in 1981 only ran 16 performances.
I know,
Mm.
and that's just how it is. I have to be. I will tell anyone. Some people listen. The old dolls that I know. I went to a party some years ago. A friend of mine, Ken Robeson, he threw a party. I think it was his moving out of New York party. And I remember people kept coming up to me. Yeah, that's when I was bonsai'd. And it's around 2014 or 2015. People were like, yeah, you getting that good government check. That's what they were saying about the Lion King. It's like, because they know that show is not going anywhere. And for me, I've been able to, like, put myself in a different financial situation with my family.
Of
Um,
course.
so to a lot of people, they're like, God, that show has been running a long time. Don't you want to do something different? Sometimes, of course, but for me, the financial benefits outweighs, me going around hunting for a job. I do hope that, like, a lot of shows get more longevity. I think that can happen though, if ticket pricing, and that those shows can get, like, it used to be, you have to have that the visibility of the show and commercials and stuff like that, and plays. It's like I don't hear about too many, like, great plays anymore, on Broadway lasting. It's always the musicals.
Right. Right. Well, I'm going to ask you about one other musical you were in as a way of closing out our time here. Um, because you played Richie in A Chorus Line. And
Yes.
as you well know, when Paul injures himself, during the tap routine at the end of the
Yeah.
show, the question comes up, what do you do when you can't dance anymore? Now, clearly you found an answer for yourself by being involved as long as you have been with The Lion King. But what do you think you'll do when you can no longer feel the love tonight? When you can no longer wake up in the morning and go, I can't wait to be on this show.
You find something else. That's, you go back to, but that word, I don't know if you can use that word because everything's so politically correct, but we used to call ourselves gypsies. You move on to, something else that's gonna inspire you. I do say that, you have to do more than one thing. You know, uh, like for me, I've been able to study acting, singing, and dancing. And that may happen. Listen, when I left the show on Broadway, and my wife and I, we went back out to LA, and then we moved down to Florida. Both in California and in Florida, I got my real estate license. I started selling timeshare, and I started, working with Keller Williams. So because for me, I always have to do something where it's like high energy and stuff like that. But that's what we do. You move on to something else. if you're like me, I say my prayers. I get down and I ask for guidance from God. I have, a few close friends that I can talk to, and that's what we've always done. It's just the same thing when I'm watching football. You see a team, and the team is having a losing season, and one coach, he's fired from one football team and he moves on to another football. So that's my friend. That's what we've always done. When you feel that thing is draining from you, that's when you have to make the decision. Either you try to regroup and find something else that can further, involve you in this thing, or you have to say to yourself, I have to move on. The thing with me with this show directing thing, though, I'm like, it's so much to learn. Oh my goodness, there's spots and dots on the floor. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Well, who stands there and what's that? And then the void and this line, he pulled on this line, and the hits have to be. I mean, it's so much to learn. It's the other side of that. It keeps me up all night, and learning all the dialogue of all the characters. But when that time comes, I just have to make that decision. Trust in God and say, okay, Keith, it's time for you to go and do something. And like you said, I've done it, hundreds of, times, in my career. I've been in the show, and what do you do when the show closes? You go and audition for another show.